This month's article looks at how we can build interactivity into a Power Query. Now, Power Query has been covered in a couple of other articles in the past, and I highly recommend that you review those if you aren't familiar with Power Query. So Power Query allows you to import data from virtually any source into Excel and then perform what are called data cleansing operations on that data. So that can include fixing dates, fixing some of the data. There's a whole lot of things that are covered in the previous articles that I've covered. So have a look at those if you're not using Power Query already. Again, highly recommend that you look at Power Query if you're doing any sort of stuff with data. What we're going to focus on here is how we can allow the user to interact with the query. So what normally happens is when you're creating a Power Query, you can go into the query itself and make a change to edit it and change what happens. But what we want you to do is the ability to basically give a file to a user, and that the user can change some of the parameters and allow them to import different data. So in our example here, this is the data we're going to be working with. Very simple data. So again, I'm not going to be focusing on the data cleansing side. I'm going to be focusing on the interactivity side. So what we want the ability to do is to filter by state and by the year. And so what we're going to do is we're going to import the data, and then we're going to add a couple of extra queries that will basically add the interactivity to this main query. So this is what the data looks like. I'm going to close this now because we're going to import it. So this is a CSV file called data, and I've just got it in a temp folder. So this is how we're going to allow the user to interact with the query. So they're going to be able to select a state that they want to import and a year that they want to import. But first, we've got to create the query that brings the data in. So let's do that. So under data, so this is Excel 2016 that we're looking at, which is the latest version as I'm recording. There is a new version of Excel due out later this year. If you're in a previous version, you'll have a dedicated ribbon tab for Power Query. What we want to do is import a CSV file. So I'm going to click the From Text CSV, and basically I'm going to have to navigate to find, I'll just bring this in a bit, navigate to where the file is. So that is my file that I'm going to be working with there. That is in a temp folder. I'm going to click import. This is the initial dialog that comes up. I'm just going to click edit, and then it's going to open up the Power Query window down into here. I think that should be big enough. Power Query has automatically done a few things here to the data. It's promoted the headers, which is really good. So that's what I want. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to change the data types to make sure that they're doing what I want. So the date, I'm going to right click and just make sure, so change type, just make sure it is a date. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to add another column. So add column. And what I want to do is I want to bring out the year. So it's just going to be the year. So you click the date drop down and select year. And what that does is that inserts a column that is for the year. Now I'm going to make that a whole number. It's got a fraction. This little icon here shows that it's has a built-in decimal. So I'm going to right click, change type, and I'm going to go whole number. Now, it is important to make sure that the columns that you're going to filter on are certain data types. So this is a whole number and the date is a date. And so when I'm going to filter those, the parameter table that we're going to create later must match those data types. Okay, so I've changed I made sure the date is a date and that the year is a whole number. And then I'm going to do my filter. So I'm going to filter by state, filter by WA. And then I'm going to filter by the year, and I'm going to choose 2017. Click OK. So they're my two filters that I've applied. Now they're the things that I want the user to be able to interact with. So ultimately, we're going to come back and amend this filtered row step. So each one of these, by the way, is a step that happens in sequence. So when I click my refresh button on my data, it's automatically going to run these in sequence. And the last thing it does is the filtered rows, and that's the one I'm going to amend a little bit later. So I'm pretty much finished with this now. So what I'm going to do is go back to the home ribbon and click close and load. And that's going to drop that into a separate sheet. I'll just call that extract here. So here we go. So this is basically figure 1 on the article there. Okay, so we've imported the data. To change that at the moment, I'd have to go into the query and edit the query to change the filter for the state and the year. So what I've created is what's typically called a parameter table. So I've got a parameter for the state and a parameter for the year. So what we're going to do is create 2 separate queries that are going to provide the main query with, in this case, New South Wales, and then 2018. So it's going to change the 2 filters there. So to do that, we're going to click inside. Oh, before I get into that, this has been defined using format as table. So under the home ribbon, there's this format as table option that has been used on this table, which is the color coding. And if I click in the table, you'll see I've got a design tab as well. And I've renamed that to, it just gives it a generic name of table 1, table 2. And I've named that TBL, so I know it's a table, parameters. So TBL parameters is the name of this formatted table. So you need to use a formatted table. One of the advantages with formatted tables is it works pretty much seamlessly with Power Query. There's a lot of other advantages as well. Okay, so I'm going to click back on data. This time I'm going to use from table and range. Because I'm inside the table already, I can click on from table range. And it pretty much takes me directly to the Power Query editor. Now I'm going to rename, this is important, I'm going to rename this query because it just uses the table name. I'm going to rename this state. So that's called the state. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to click the parameter column drop down and I'm going to filter just by the state. Click OK. Then I'm going to get rid of the parameter column. So right click remove. And then this is the important part. I'm going to right click on the NSW entry and I'm going to drill down. Now normally a Power Query will return a table, but we don't want the table. We just want that NSW. That's the important thing that we want. And so this query is returning a single entry. So what we've done is we've converted a query basically into a variable. So now this state is the same as New South Wales in our case. So I'm going to go back home. Oh, but that's right. I need to actually, I'm going to get rid of that. By the way, there is no undo in Power Query. And so I've just deleted that last step because what I need to do is I'm just going to right click on this and change type to text. Okay, so now that's defined as text. I'm going to right click the NSW and drill down. And that again, that converts that to the value. So we're done. So that is now finished. Back to home. So I'm going to click the drop down here and I'm going to say close and load to. I just want to create the connection. Normally a query will drop into an Excel sheet. Now I don't want that. I don't need that. So all I'm going to do is create the connection. Done. Now all I'm going to do is exactly those same steps but for the year, and so a couple of little differences there. So again, click on data, click on from table range, again straight into the actual Power Query. Again, change the name. This time I'm going to call this year, so YEAR, and again click the drop down for the parameter and just select year. Get rid of the column for the parameter because we don't need that now. Change the value. So again, I need to match the value here. So I'm going to right click that and change that to a whole number. So that matches the year column that we're going to be filtering. Going to right click on the 2018 figure and drill down. And again, we've converted the query of year into basically a variable. That's it. Same steps here. Close and load to drop down, close and load to, and only create connection. And that's it. So we're pretty much done now, ready to convert the original query, which is called data. And so I'm going to double click on that. So I'll just slide this over. So these are the queries that are in the file. And I'm going to double click on the data to go back into that. Now, as I mentioned, this last entry here is where we did the filtering. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to just make this screen a bit bigger so we can see everything. Each of these has a formula. Now, if you don't have the formula bar visible, so under view, you might be like this, so you can't see the formula bar. So just tick the formula bar. This shows basically the Power Query command that has been used to do whatever you do, okay? So that is inserted there. So if I click back on filtered rows, this is the command to do the filtering. Now you can see that I've got WA here in quotation marks. So that's what I did. I selected it. So that's how it's created it. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to get rid of all of that. So all of the quotation marks and WA, and just type in state. And the same for the year. Get rid of the 2017 and type in year. Now they are queries. They are case sensitive, so make sure you get those. I put a capital in front of both of those, so that's why I've used that there. So that has converted the query into a flexible query or an interactive query, because the word state is a query and the word year is a query. They're the two queries that we created. That's it. So we can now go back to home and go close and load. Now remember, I had filtered by New South Wales and 2018 in the parameter table. So let's see what happens. And here you can see it's now filtering by New South Wales and the year is 2018. So one of the other states was Victoria, so I could go back here, change this to Vic, and let's put that back to 2017. So when I come back to the extract and click in this table and refresh it, so you can click on the data query here and right click and just click refresh. And so now you can see that we've got Victoria and 2017. So the user can tweak these entries in the parameter table, and then when the data is refreshed, automatically the new selections are updated. And so that works for the filter. Now, as I mentioned, you need to make sure that you get the data types right for when you're doing the filtering. So the year here is a whole number in this one, and it's also a whole number that when I selected this particular query, when I filtered it, and then I changed the value to a whole number. So I hope you found that useful. It's how you can convert a normal query into a query that the user can change without actually having to go and edit the query. Editing the query can be a little bit daunting for some users, and so what you can do is if again you've been using Power Query for a while and you want to actually get things out to users with some interactivity, then this is one way to do that. If you've got any comments, feel free to leave them at the bottom of the post. There is example files in the article on the web. If you want to have a go at this yourself, feel free. Thanks for watching, and I hope you found this useful.